Listen closely, my children, and let your hearts be still. For there was once a village where every soul remembered a sound that no one could forget. It was not the cry of a newborn. It was not the wailing of a widow. It was a sound like thunder when the skies were clear, like the earth trembling, though no hoof struck the ground. They said it was the voice of a drum that once sang of joy, but later it beat only sorrow. When it sounded, huts fell silent, goats froze in their tracks, even the birds fled the trees, as if they feared to hear its voice again. Some called it the drum of death. Others whispered that it was the ancestors' anger made flesh, but it was not always so. Once, that drum was carved with love, polished with care, and given as a gift to a young soul whose music lit the hearts of her people. Once, its voice brought laughter and dancing, not ashes and grief. Yet, as the elders say, the river that gives life can also take it away. And so it was with this drum. But how could a gift of joy become a curse of destruction? When the first rays of dawn spilled over the red earth of Erie, it was not the crowing of roosters that woke the village. It was the drum. Nia's hands danced across the goatskin with a rhythm so pure it made the air itself tremble. Her drum was no ordinary drum. It was carved from the sacred Iroko tree, polished smooth by her father's hands, and blessed with cowrie shells that rattled like whispers of the ancestors each time she struck the skin. The sound poured into every corner of the village. Farmers paused in their fields and felt their shoulders lighten. Mothers hummed as they pounded yam, their pestles striking in time with her rhythm. Children laughed and clapped, their bare feet kicking up dust as they spun in endless circles around her. Even the elders, stiff with age, tapped their walking sticks to the beat and smiled through toothless mouths. They would often say that Nia's drum does not speak to the people, it speaks for them. Others whispered, when Nia plays, even the ancestors lean close to listen. Her gift healed quarrels, lifted sorrow, and stitched the community together with joy. On festival nights, the fire burned bright and shadows leapt across the huts as her drum sang into the stars. To hear it was to remember that life, though heavy with burdens, could also dance. But where the people saw light, one man saw only shadow. For among the clapping hands and joyful voices stood Oba, the chief's son. His face did not glow with delight. His jaw tightened. His eyes followed Nia with the cold stare of a snake waiting in the grass. He too was a drummer, but the people did not cheer for him. They did not lean in wonder when his hands struck the skin. With every cheer for Nia, with every laugh that rose at her playing, something in his heart coiled tighter. And though the villagers were blind to it, that night, as the flames painted his face in golden shadow, envy flickered in his eyes. For while the people celebrated her gift, one heart in the crowd grew darker with every beat. But envy is a fire, my children, and once it takes root in the heart, it eats away at joy until only ashes remain. Oba, the chief's son, stood tall and proud in the daylight, but inside he carried a shadow. Every cheer for Nia was like a thorn in his flesh. Every clap of the villagers' hands sounded to him like mockery. One evening, as the festival fires blazed, Oba sat in silence while the people danced to Nia's drum. His fingers clenched the calabash cup in his hands until it cracked. He muttered under his breath, "Why must they look at her? Am I not the son of the chief? Is my blood not noble? Why should her hands alone hold the power of the ancestors?" But no one listened. Their ears were tuned only to Nia's rhythm, their eyes only to her grace. Even his own father, the chief, tapped his foot softly to her beat. That night, Oba's pride burned hotter than the flames in the fire pit. And when the moon rose high and the village slept, Oba did not sleep. His footsteps were soft as he crept through the silent huts, his shadow long across the earth. The crickets sang, the night wind carried the smell of wood smoke, but Oba heard nothing but the pounding of his own heart. At last, he reached Nia's hut. The sacred drum rested there, glowing faintly in the firelight, like it knew it was being watched. Oba's breath caught. He reached for it. The wood felt warm beneath his fingers, as though alive. For a moment, he hesitated, but envy whispered louder than caution. Carefully, he lifted the drum, clutching it to his chest like stolen treasure. With the patience of a thief, he slipped into the forest, where the shadows of the Iroko trees swallowed him whole. And though the village slept peacefully, their joy was already gone, carried into the night by jealous hands. For what Oba planned in secret would summon a power no man could control. Deeper and deeper, Oba walked into the forest, clutching the drum to his chest. The trees stood like ancient guardians, their roots twisted, their branches clawing at the moonlit sky. Owls hooted, bats fluttered overhead. The deeper he went, the heavier the air grew, thick with the smell of damp earth and old secrets. At last, he reached a crooked hut, leaning against the roots of a giant Iroko. Its thatch was blackened with soot. Charms of bone and feathers dangled from the roof, clicking softly in the night breeze. This was the home of Okoya, the old diviner, the one men visited only when desperation or darkness drove them. The door creaked as Oba stepped inside. The air was heavy with the smoke of burning herbs, bitter and sharp, stinging his throat. The old man sat cross-legged by the fire, his eyes clouded with age, but sharp with knowing. "Oba!" the diviner rasped, his voice like dry leaves. "Why do you disturb the ancestors at this hour?" Oba set the drum down between them. His face was hard, but his hands trembled. "I want its voice twisted. I want its song to obey me and me alone. Give me the power to silence her. Give me the strength to claim the people's praise." The old diviner's eyes narrowed. He tapped the ground with his staff. "You ask for chains to bind a spirit that was born free. The voice of the ancestors is not a toy. To twist it is to summon wrath you cannot contain." But Oba leaned forward, desperation burning in his voice. "I am the son of the chief. I will not live in her shadow. Curse it. Bind it. Do as I command." For a long moment, the hut was silent, but for the crackle of the fire. At last, Okoya sighed, his shoulders heavy. "So be it, but remember, Oba, the ancestors do not give gifts without a price." The diviner reached into his pouch, scattering ashes onto the drum's skin. He tied charms of bone, feather, and black string around its body. He muttered words that twisted the air, words men were never meant to hear. And then, thrum! The drum roared on its own. Its skin rippled like water, its sound shaking the walls of the hut. A voice, deep and thunderous, filled the air. "This drum will answer only blood for its song." The fire flared high. Shadows leapt like spirits on the walls. Oba's eyes widened, but then a smile crept across his lips. He believed he had won. He believed the drum was his. But envy is a fool's crown, my children. For Oba thought he had won, but the first beat of the cursed drum would shake the village to its core. The night of the harvest festival came, and the air was alive with celebration. Torches lined the village square, their flames dancing in the wind. Women wore bright cloth woven in reds and golds. The smell of roasted goat and palm wine drifted through the air, and laughter rose like music. The people gathered in expectation, waiting for Nia's hands to call forth the first rhythm of the night. But it was not Nia who stepped forward. It was Oba. He carried the sacred drum in his arms, his eyes glittering in the firelight. A hush fell over the crowd, confused murmurs spreading like ripples in a pond. Where was Nia? Why was the chief's son holding her drum? Oba raised his chin proudly. "Tonight," he declared, "you will hear true music, the kind that only I can command." Before Nia could rise from her place among the dancers, Oba struck the drum. Boom! The sound shook the ground beneath their feet. Boom! The flames of the torches flared high, as though fed by unseen hands. And then the rhythm came, fast and furious, thundering like a storm trapped in the skin of the drum. The people gasped, then laughed nervously, then suddenly They began to dance. Feet moved without command, arms twisted wildly, bodies swayed as if strings had been tied to their limbs. The square erupted in chaos, a sea of bodies moving to a rhythm they could not resist. At first, there was laughter, but the laughter turned to cries. The cries turned to screams. The villagers clawed at their legs, their feet striking the earth until they bled. Mothers tried to pull their children away, but even the little ones spun in circles, eyes wide and glassy, as if possessed by unseen spirits. Nia leapt forward, her face pale with horror. "Stop, Oba!" she cried above the thunder of the drum. "This is no music, it is death." But Oba only laughed, his voice sharp with madness. His hands beat harder, faster, sweat streaming down his face. "Look," he shouted, "even the ancestors cannot resist me. Even they bow to my rhythm." The villagers screamed, their voices swallowed by the pounding drum. The square that once held joy now rang with terror, and in the spaces between the beats, if you listened closely, there was something else, something deeper, a rumble, low and dangerous, as though the earth itself was listening. For Oba had forgotten one truth the elders always spoke. The ancestors are patient, but they are never deaf. Yet the ancestors were listening, and their answer would be more terrible than anyone imagined. The cursed rhythm grew louder, faster, heavier. Each beat rolled through the night like thunder trapped inside the earth. Boom! The ground cracked open, splitting like the shell of a calabash. Boom! Huts shuddered, their thatched roofs tumbling into flames. Boom! The cooking fires in the square flared into pillars of fire, leaping high into the sky as if called by the drum itself. Men screamed, women wailed, children cried, but still their bodies danced, beaten into madness by a rhythm that would not release them. Their feet struck the ground until blood painted the dust. Their voices rose in terror, swallowed by the roar of destruction, and above it all stood Oba, his face twisted in triumph, hands pounding the drum, as if he commanded the gods themselves. But the gods do not bow. They strike. The earth rumbled like a furious beast. Cracks raced across the village, swallowing goats, grinding stone to powder. Palm trees toppled as if ripped out by unseen fists. Flames leapt from the hut to hut, consuming everything in their path. Each beat of the drum took another life, another soul, another piece of the village that once was. Nia fought to break free from the cursed rhythm. Her body shook, her arms resisted, her spirit cried out. At last, with a scream, she fell to the ground and crawled through the dust, pulling herself away from the frenzy. Tears blurred her vision, but what she saw was death all around her. Neighbors she had laughed with, children she had played with, elders who had blessed her, now lying still, their faces lit by fire. And then silence. The drum gave one final thunderclap, then stopped. Smoke drifted over what remained of the village. No singing, no laughter, only ashes, ruin, and the silence of the dead. Only Nia still breathed, trembling on the earth, her hands bleeding, her heart broken. She turned her head, and there it lay beside her, the drum. Its skin was dark now, as though it had drunk its fill of blood. But the cursed drum was not finished. It still demanded a resting place. Nia sat among the ashes of her people, her heart torn open by grief. Smoke curled into the night sky, carrying with it the memory of laughter that would never return. And beside her, silent now, lay the drum. Its skin no longer glowed with joy. It pulsed darkly, as though it had swallowed every soul it had slain. With shaking hands, Nia dragged it to the center of the ruined square. Her voice cracked as she cried, "If you will not sing life, then you will not sing at all." She heaped dry wood around it, struck flint, and watched flames leap high. But the fire refused it. The wood turned to ash. The smoke rose into the heavens, yet the drum sat untouched, its skin gleaming as though mocking her. Weeping, she carried it to the great river. The waters rushed fast and furious, the kind that had swallowed men whole. Nia heaved the drum into its depths. The current pulled it under, but a moment later the waters roared and spat it back onto the shore, dripping, heavy, unbroken. Exhausted, Nia fell to her knees. Her tears darkened the soil beneath her, and for a moment She wished the ancestors had taken her too, but the wind whispered through the trees, carrying an old proverb. The child who carries fire in her hands must choose where to set it down. So Nia rose, gathering the cursed drum once more. Her body ached, but her spirit would not yield. She turned her back on the ruins of her village and walked deep into the forbidden forest where no hunter dared tread. The trees grew thick and twisted, their branches blotting out the moonlight. Strange eyes glimmered in the darkness, and unseen creatures stirred in the shadows. But still she pressed on. At last she came upon a strangler fig. Its roots coiled around the earth like the grip of a giant's hand. With the last of her strength, she dug into the ground. Clawing at the soil with bleeding fingers, she laid the drum deep among the roots, whispering through her tears, "Rest here, trouble the living no more." The roots seemed to close over it, binding it in the earth. Nia stood in silence, her breath ragged, her body trembling. At last, the cursed drum was hidden from the world, but the forest never forgets. And some say, on windless nights, if you walk near that strangler fig and press your ear to the ground, you can still hear a faint beat beneath the roots. Nia lived on, though her heart never healed from the ashes she carried inside. She wandered from village to village, her voice heavy with sorrow, her eyes older than her years. Wherever she went, she told the story of the cursed drum, so the people would remember, so no soul would repeat the mistake that had destroyed her home. By moonlight, children would gather at her feet, their eyes wide, their small hands clinging to each other. As they listened, mothers hushed their babies to silence. Fathers leaned close to catch every word. And when Nia's voice trembled with grief, the whole village would fall quiet, as though the ancestors themselves were listening through her. She ended every telling with the same warnings. Jealousy is a fire that consumes its own home. The hand that calls on dark power digs its own grave. Her words spread farther than her footsteps. They crossed rivers, climbed mountains, and reached lands where Nia's face was unknown. But her story was feared, and so the cursed drum became a legend, a whisper on the wind that carried lessons sharper than any spear. Yet, legends are never only stories. They are warnings, and warnings are often ignored. Some hunters claim they have heard the faint beat of a drum in the forbidden forest. Some say they saw a root move, as though something buried deep was still alive. The wise shake their heads and say, "Leave the forest to its silence. Do not wake what was meant to sleep." But the reckless always wonder, and so the cursed drum waits, silent, patient, listening. Would you be brave or foolish enough to play it?